Hello, my friends, and welcome to Tangle Time Arts. My name is Nana Heron, and I'm a certified Zentangle teacher. And this week, we're actually going to look at 2 weeks because I missed last week. So we're looking at weeks 21 and 22. We're going to be looking at the Tangles Locar and Diva Dance. For this project, I'm just using basic supplies. I have a black pen. I'm using the Apprentice pen. I have a tortillon and I have a number 2 pencil. And I'm also using a Zendala for this. If you don't have a Zendala, you could just use a white sheet of paper, a sketchbook, or you could also use like an Apprentice tile, a larger tile. All right, let's get started. So we're going to also need to draw a circle to start with. You can use a compass or something that you have around to draw a circle. And I'm just going to use this tape for the first circle. And then I'll grab my pencil. I'm just going to trace around on the inside. And you want to do that lightly. I'm doing it a little darker so that you can see at home. And then I'm just going to kind of pencil in another circle inside. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm kind of doing an aura of the circle, but on the inside. So it definitely does not need to be perfect, and you'll see why in a minute or two. So once you get that drawn in, you can set your pencil aside and pick up your pen. Now, Locar is one of those tangles that I learned early on, and I keep coming back to it because it's very organic and it uses really one continuous or one connected line on both sides. And it just fascinates me. The possibilities, the varieties are endless. All right. So you can start anywhere you want. I'm going to start on the bottom and I'm going to start kind of on the outside circle here. So we'll do the outside first and then we'll do the inside. And with Locar, you can also do it as straight or curved lines. And for your points or the ends of this, they're like stems. You can choose a point or a straight line or rounded. I prefer to use the points. All right, so we're going to start anywhere on the circle, but I'm going to start down here and kind of trace along the circle for a little bit. And then I'm going to deviate from that and go off towards the outside. And I'm making a point and coming back to my circle. And then I'm going to trace along the circle a little bit. And I'm going to come off of that again and kind of loop around. When you meet the previous, these kind of look like pine needles to me a little bit, but different from vertigo. But when you meet up with that stem or needle, I want you to pick up your pen and then travel over to the other side and continue on. And again, I'm using points. And then come back on the outside of that and aura your stem and come back to the circle. And then travel along the circle again. So it's constantly going up and around. Jump over that, finish your point, jump back over that, and come back to the circle and travel back along the circle. And we're just going to continue that all the way around. So once we've traveled on the circle a little bit, you're going to go back off and come back down. Travel along the circle, come up, And this time, instead of going up that way, I'm going to bring that back around. Because these are kind of very organic. And if you think of plants, there's definitely some variations. It takes a little practice at first, so definitely go at the pace that's comfortable for you. But once you get the hang of it, you can speed up a little bit. And like I said, I like to use points, but you could use a variation of it and you could do, for example, a slanted line like that instead of going with the points. Or you could come up and do a rounded end. So those are just a couple of the different things you could do. You could even make these kind of like muka on the end as well. It's totally up to you. I'm going to go back to the pointed ones because those are my favorite. And always rotate your tile so that you're comfortable, and it makes it much easier to work your way around, especially a circle. And you just keep going. Now, as we get closer to where we began, you have to make a decision. Are you going to fit another one in here? Or are you just going to come over and end it? And I think I'm just going to end that like that. Now that we finished our outside, we can work on the inside. And I like to try to mirror what I did on the outer side with what I do on the inside. So we're going to follow along the inner circle, and where this branches out up there, we're going to branch off towards the inside, come back down, follow along the circle again, and then make our other stem. So you're just doing the same thing, but in the reverse. It's kind of the mirror opposite. Your little needles or stems are going to be a little smaller because we don't have as much space on the inside as we did out here. And with this, I had done some variations, but I'm just going to continue with my pointed ones for the inside. And as you can see, we're starting to get this really nice vine looking tangle here. So if you're into botanical types of tangles, this is definitely one to experiment with because it's a lot of fun. And we'll just finish that right there. So we have this really lovely vine type of tangle in the center of our Zendala. But we do need something in the very center. So I'm going to put in a Diva Dance inspired flower. You could really use any type of flower that you like in there, or experiment with, instead of a flower, you could put little orbs around here and work those in there. But I'm going to put a little flower in the center just to add a little interest. So for Diva Dance, I'm going to work a little off center. When I work with the flowers, I kind of start like printemps with the cursive letter C. And then somewhere along this line, instead of continuing on with the aura around it, I'm going to add a little bump, and then I'm going to ink that in. And you could add the bump anywhere you'd like. And then I go back to where I left off, and then I start that aura. And when I get to the bump, I'm going to aura around the bump. And at this point, I want to add a couple of more bumps for interest. And I like to make them very rounded, but you might like to have them more flat. But I feel like with the flowers, it adds more interest if they're more rounded. So I'm just randomly adding different bumps in there as I work around. You might have more or you might have less. And then I'm just going to add a few more auras around the flower, and then I'm just going to bring it to a close there. That's one flower. And then I'm going to add another one, maybe over here. Again, starting with that C, and then adding a bump and inking that in. And you might just want to have one large flower or a bunch of smaller ones. That's up to you. Rotate a little bit so it's more comfortable for me. I'm just going to close that off there. I think I can add one more small flower here. And just like with some of the other tangles, you can kind of tuck them behind the others. Kind of get that hollow effect there. I think I'll finish that like that. I am going to fill in this little space there with some ink. And there, now we have some flowers. If you'd like to add some leaves, you could, but I feel like it's getting a little busy, so I'm just going to leave the flowers in there. And before we do some shading, in order to add some interest to the center, which I feel would be darker, I'm just going to add some stippling in the areas that are not the flower or the vine. And stippling is just adding little points of ink to the areas that you'd like some shading. The closer you put the points, the darker it will be. So I'm not adding so many that it's going to be really dark, but this area is going to be a little darker than this outer area. And it's just a drawing technique that I like to add sometimes to my pieces. Does take a little time though. I try to put them in randomly so it doesn't look like rows or lines of little dots. And then I'll take a look and see if I want to add some more to that area overall. This area that I did initially doesn't have quite as many dots, so I'm going to add a couple more. So that is stippling. And as you can see, it does definitely add to the shading. Now you could do things like have more dots in this area here and fewer dots around here. But I'm going to leave that as is. And I'm going to put the cap on my pen and set it aside for the moment. And then I'm going to pick up my pencil and I'm going to start shading. And again, with these, I have one flower that's behind the other two. So I definitely want to add a little bit of shading there. And then I'm going to add shading around our little Diva Dance flowers. And I'm working obviously from the center out, but if you prefer to work outside in, that's totally fine. All right, so I have some shading, some graphite around our flowers. Now I'm going to add it around this area here. And I like to put it, just to be consistent, I'm going to do all of these areas that are kind of enclosed by the needles. And then I'll move on to do these kind of valley areas here. This one does have a lot of shading because I'm shading outside of the tangles, not really inside of the tangles themselves. And then I'll add a little graphite along these areas too, where the little needles cross. It's definitely a lot of shading. And then we'll take a look at the outer ring. And again, I'm going to start by adding some graphite to these areas that are enclosed by the needles. And then, like we did before, I'm going to add some to these valley areas. And then along the outside here where the two cross. Once we have that filled in pretty well, we're going to set our pencil aside and pick up our tortillon. Now, just a reminder, we're just doing a light layer. If you'd like it darker, you can always go back and add another layer of graphite. But if you start out with too much on there, then it's not really an easy thing to remove it. You're kind of stuck with it. All right, let's start from the center and get these areas where that one flower was behind the others. And then we'll kind of work our way out here. Like that. And what I like to do sometimes with these flowers, because we have these areas here where it's kind of like petals going in. And if you have enough graphite on the tip of your tortillon, you don't need your pencil to add some shading here. You just use your tortillon and put a little of that in there. You're just adding a little bit there. Like that. All right. Then we're going to work along this area here. So I'm just gently rubbing the tortillon. In these areas, it's definitely a circular motion. And for the other areas, it's mostly a circular motion. Sometimes it's back and forth though. It just depends on the area. You get that kind of nice scratchy sound when you're working on a Zendala. And you just gently work your way around. You don't need to press too hard. Just keep the circular motion going. Then we also have these kind of areas where they kind of cross. That. So you can see how we have this lovely shading in here with the stippling and the graphite. It really just adds more depth that way. All right, now we're moving on to our outer ring here. You can start anywhere you want, and I'm just going to start kind of on the bottom right here. And we're just doing the same thing, working our way around. But it looks a little lighter because we don't have the stippling. And again, it's mostly the circular motions. Sometimes it's a back and forth. Then we'll pick up some of these areas. Please remember to rotate your tile and also breathe. Sometimes I'm focused so much that I come to realize I've been holding my breath. So remember to take nice, deep cleansing breaths and really enjoy the process. And I think we're back to where we started. Take a quick look there. And what I am going to do, I'm going to do one step further. You could leave it like this if you'd like, but I think I want to add a little graphite to the outer edge there. And for this, I'm going to take a pencil and just run it around the edge. And then we'll blend it in with our tortillon. So how are you all doing? I'm just checking in with you. How are you doing? If you need to pause this and work at your own pace, please do. All right, once I have that in, I'm going to take the tortillon and I'm just kind of softening that edge. And I do that last because I don't want, because I often put my fingers on the edge of the tile. If I had put that on earlier, it's going to make my fingers all smudgy, and then I could possibly have fingerprints in unwanted areas on my tile. All right, how cool is that? So we have our Locar vine in a circle, and we put some flowers in there as well. All right, so we can put our initials in somewhere, and I'm just probably going to have mine coming off of here because I ended up with kind of a larger space here than I normally would have liked, but that's okay. There's no mistakes. I'm going to put my initials right there and just add that. All right. And I'm going to turn it over. And let's see. This is we're doing tangles of the week. And I think it's 21 and 22. And we have Locar. And it's kind of a variation of Diva Dance, sort of. Diva Dance as a flower. Okay. And today's date is the 2nd of June. I can't believe it's June already. Don't know where the time went. And I always like to put my name on there. All right. So take a moment to appreciate your tile, take a good look at it. I might do another video on adding color to it, but I feel like this was a good exercise in shading and especially using some stippling to make some areas a little darker, which is kind of cool. I always like doing that if I can. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, but with this one, I think I really like it. Thank you for joining me. This has been a really fun Zendala to do. I like working in the round. It's always fun for me, and I hope you enjoy that too. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next time. I love you guys. Thanks for joining me.